is the philosophy podcast brought to you by people who are more or less qualified to talk about philosophy on the internet, just like everybody else. So today I'm, of course, joined by none other than my fabulous co-hosts, Trevor and Stefan, here in whichever order that you find them. They will not care how you refer to them because they won't. Yeah. Anyways,
start.
I'm Bray, and we welcome you back, both newcomers and returning listeners. Today, we're going to be revisiting a topic that we dabbled in quite a bit around 6 months ago. The title of the episodes were Artificial Constructs. There was a two-parter that we did, and we discussed first the overarching topic, dove into virtual worlds, and then explored a little bit of artificial intelligence. And I still can't even remember if we got that far into artificially generated art or not. But I'm seeking today to corral these guys back into a discussion on virtual worlds, virtual realities in particular, and sort of expand that topic beyond what we visited last time. And just for a quick recap, what we discussed last time was a little bit more in the realm of how real we consider virtual realities compared to what we might describe as natural reality, like what we all experience every day. And there was a little bit of discussion on could that be meaningful, or is it valuable, perhaps, was the angle that we took then. But like I said, I want to expand on those today, and I'm about to allow my co-hosts the opportunity to give a little bit of a piece here as I feed them a question. But just a point before I do that, the way that I want to expand on the topic today is to talk more about, obviously, is it possible to live a meaningful life or so in a virtual reality, but also take just virtual realities and pull that out to include not just what we're all thinking when we say virtual reality, like sticking a piece of plastic on your face and looking at a lens and having some sort of interaction with virtual objects. I want that to right. I want that to extend to all of the ways that we make interactions through a digital landscape that are necessarily interactable. So that includes video games, but excludes things like films, television, and those sorts of mediums, because those are not interactive in the same way. Like, you cannot watch a movie. I cannot watch Revenge of the Sith for the umpteenth time and will that Anakin does not cut off Mace Windu's hand whenever he visits the Chancellor's office.
You can write fan fiction.
Actually, just plain not yet. I mean, I can only assume at some point there'll be some sort of not AGI, but like some sort of thing where you can maneuver and manipulate in space and time whatever movie you're presently watching. And some sort of artificially generated hellscape that you can survey.
You can just stream of consciousness, some sort of AI, video to your mind nonstop.
Our lives are about to become a whole lot like that Ready Player One thing. Not like the the virtual reality, but more like just the fact that you can like suddenly summon the Iron Giant fighting Darth Vader off the face of the earth while in a cylindrical feedback loop with Rama and Jesus and Muhammad, peace be upon him, all looking off in the distance.
As it is willed, so will it be done.
Yeah.
So great. We got the Ernest Cline reference in early tonight, as well as honorable mention Darth Vader, rest in peace, James Earl Jones.
Yeah, I saw James Earl Jones
93.
That's sad.
So a legend has departed from us. But anyways, so I'm going to dive straight in here. You guys know how the Bray episodes go. We could end up talking about rock and roll McDonald's again for all I know. So we'll just see where it goes.
A good one.
The question that I want to pose to you two is, what to you makes an experience meaningful?
Open table point. Okay. So what makes an experience meaningful? That's the question. And
could we all agree first on life is a myriad of experiences?
I mean, that's a useful way of looking at it. Certainly. Yeah, you could say that.
So I'm trying not to talk too much this particular time. My internet's so bad. But I mean, like y'all
you
been
got to
coming
Zerg
in,
rush it.
like here and there. I've been trying to keep up. But like, is life contained to a myriad of experiences? No, can't be.
I would say, as a better way to encounter what we mean by life, so life is an abstraction, the word life, and I encounter it in all sorts of ways. And if I want to get at and encounter this idea with the audience in mind, and get at something and get at a point that could be of value to this context of what is life, it would be valuable. There is, in fact, value in looking at it as a myriad of experiences. It's a useful way of evaluating it. It's not all of it. But that is, in fact, a way you could get at what you mean by life, and you could, in fact.
That's not the angle I had
perhaps...
on it at all. It was more like, what can you inherit? What can you not inherit? What can you pass on? And so you can pass on information that doesn't necessarily belong to people. In other words, we can learn history, but you can also pass on the digital information of your genetic code.
Mm-hmm. Let me frame it this way. Would we ever define a human life as anything but a capability to experience?
Yeah, of course. You could define a human life as all sorts of things.
I mean, like, that would be a necessary part. Like, you could not say that somebody was living a human life if they were not experiencing.
Like, in terms of, so now we're kind of getting to a philosophy of mind thing. Like, do they have to have qualia? Does there have to be something it is like to be this person in order for them to be a person? Is that what we're saying?
They must be experiencing.
Yeah, so that sounds like
we would not,
to me, yeah.
Right. We would not consider somebody who is clinically dead 6 foot under to be having any sort of experience.
Sure.
Well, I mean, what about...
You're not making controversial points.
What about infants? What about babies?
Is there something it is like to be that baby?
They are experiencing. Are they not?
Well, they are laying down groundwork for things like...
Are they fulfilling meaningful behavior?
Well, babies are strange. So talking about babies for a second. So when we talk about like experience, this is where it gets really complicated. When you say that something experiences, something special about humans that make us somewhat distinct in some ways is that a human experiences, and they also know that they experience. That is to say that there is a juxtaposition between being and knowledge of what was before this being. There's that separation there, and it's due to that juxtaposition between these two things that you have, which you and I may call like consciousness. We want to call it that. It's that reflection between those two things. The fact that you have a past necessarily allows you to have a present. But if your only state of being is just the present moment, then you have no possible way to abstract or anything, because there's no juxtaposition there. There's no memory. There's no knowledge. It's just present being, in the same sense that I really don't know what it is like to be a baby. I can't remember.
Sure.
But it may very well be that for a baby, it is only being, no other form of existence. Therefore, they aren't presently aware that they have being. And therefore, you could argue in that sense that there is nothing it is like to be a baby, because they can't possibly know. That I don't know that for certain, but you could take that route, and it could be valuable. I'm not sure.
Okay, so fair point. I would probably argue that anyone who at any stage of even there's something it is like to be a fetus, even as we have all been a fetus.
Right, but well, here's what's weird about fetuses and all that. You've also been a singular cell right at the point of conception. Is there something it is like to be that singular cell? Like, is there an actual qualitative?
No.
Is there a quality to that being?
Not as we would call it human experience. That's why I asked. That's
Fair.
a whole other avenue. Basically,
Certainly.
I'm entertaining this a bit, but all I mean to say is that we can describe in what I would consider a fairly popular way that life is for a human being, and for many other types of life as well, is just a collection of experiences or one contiguous experience, or however you want to describe it. It is, practically necessary that life, the cycle that we are all living right now, is just a collection of experiences.
So I think what you have now is a particular a bubble that you have cast around the fundamental what is humanity. And I think it's a useful bubble. I don't think it's not useful. I don't mean to pop it. I think it's a useful bubble to create. But it's not just. I think the word just is wrong. I think what you've created is a particular framework from which to encounter what it means to be a human being. And then from that, you're now saying that is the one way to evaluate everything. Well, when really it's just you've created a dimension and are now evaluating it from that dimension. But there are multiple dimensions. There are multiple ways to evaluate what it means.
Is there any way that you could look at human beings in the world and say that we are not experiencing?
Certainly not. That's why it's a good bubble. It's a valid dimension. It's a perfectly valid dimension. What I mean to say is, though, that there are many different other dimensions that are still perfectly valid. You could evaluate what it means to be a human from, such as I could look at you as part of a group, as a group consciousness, a collective consciousness, and I can evaluate that you under those terms. I could evaluate you in all sorts of things. That is to say, I could talk about you and think of you while not taking in this dimension you're currently think of into consideration. It's still true, but I'm just not using it. If that makes sense. It's a bit like
sure. Well, maybe I've opened up an entirely new. Anyways, I think we're in agreement. We're just pointing out. Anyways,
we are in agreement.
So,
sure. Not the just part, but yes, please.
The question that I had posed before I backtracked for a little bit of clarity was, what makes an experience meaningful? So what could you guys provide me, even for just yourselves? What makes an experience to you meaningful?
Okay. So when I encounter meaningful, it's something that I am doing. It's something that has welled up from within. But this is going to sound strange. It's not necessarily something that I chose in a strange way. Like my ego, my abstraction of what I myself am, that part of me doesn't necessarily imbue reality with meaning, but I do. The entirety of my character, the entire framework of my being, it's from that where meaning wells up. But there is sort of a menagerie abstraction of what it means, what Trevor is in my own mind, and like my present being right now, that is that person. That being, I have very little choice in the matter as to what is and what is not meaningful. Like, for example, if I see someone murdered in the street, I don't personally, me speaking, have a choice in how disgusted and horrified I am at the prospect of seeing that. And what I would do next, what would happen next would be a very serious moral and ethical set of thoughts that have to immediately be encountered, and I have to encounter them. And I can't go and look at that murder and look at it and then justify it in my mind right now, right here. It's sort of a gearbox that has to unlock and unwell. It still wells up from within me, but it's not necessarily Trevor that's doing it. Not my idea of Trevor. Does that make sense?
I'm following you a little bit. Let me have Stefan give me an example of something that would make an experience meaningful for you.
So
and we'll have a look here.
I've been trying not to speak too much because I know for a fact I'm just gonna talk at people. Like I said, my internet connection is so bad tonight. Uh, I'm gathering most of what you're talking about, and most of what Trevor's talking about, and what what makes an experience meaningful. Well, what would make an experience meaningless? I mean, I don't understand what quality someone could put on an experience to make it meaningless. In other words, like barring you trapped in a dungeon against your will, right? Um, whatever you happen to be doing right now, uh, it's creating something about you. I mean, the only quality I can imagine to make a meaningful experience is that it has to be related to your past, and it must be related to your future. So, in other words, you're here, and the only way you got here was because of your past, and your present moment will lead to the future. I mean, so truly,
Yeah.
I mean, just about anything you're doing. I don't understand the argument from like the contradiction type of idea. What would qualify something as meaningless?
So perhaps we would all agree that to a certain degree, everything that we do is meaningful.
Sure, and I mean, like, we shouldn't conflate meaningful with good, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh no! Oh no!
That's what I'm trying to get across, right?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, we all go through like trauma, and there's no reason to say that trauma is good. Is it character building? If you're lucky, if you go to therapy,
right?
You know,
right.
if
Those slaves learned valuable life skills.
yeah, that's the argument I'm trying to get away from,
right?
In other words, like that trauma was not as meaningful as what they could have been doing, and that's what makes it sad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they
So
could have been doing something of their
let
own
me
free
pull this
will.
in and kind of give you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to.
I mean,
trying to work with.
You get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying.
So, what makes an experience meaningful? These are some of the things that I have down here, and these are based in part off of a book that I also brought up in the previous discussion when we were doing artificial constructs, and that's the David Chalmers book, Reality Plus. And so there's 4 points on here that I've drawn here. One being relationships. Relationships make an experience meaningful. And perhaps I should connect this again, that I was previously trying to define life in this context as a series of experiences that we all partake in. So something that we would consider meaningful in life is having relationships with other people. We would also consider perhaps setting and meeting certain goals, going to college, getting a degree, finding a job, maybe having a family, settling down somewhere, or doing any number of different things. These are common goals that people have in life. Gaining knowledge is often something we consider meaningful in the same aspect, and experiencing a range of emotions, being human, which is its own thing. But all of these, I don't think any of us would contend make something meaningful. The reason that I asked this question beforehand is because I don't want us to revisit whether or not we consider virtual realities to be as real as actual reality or anything like that. We've had that conversation already. I only mean for us to explore what it means to us to have experiences in virtual worlds, whether there is this amalgamation of plastic and glass attached to our face, or if it's a foot and a half away from our face or so, or even glued to our face like so. What does it mean to us to have those experiences, and can they cumulatively provide the same sort of meaningfulness that we generate in the natural world?
I have a little bit of a thought on this. I want to imagine for y'all for a second, just a bit of an abstraction, just like think of a possible future reality. I want y'all to imagine something similar in scope to what we currently think of as Neuralink, like what Neuralink is doing with ingraining chips into someone's brain, or some tendrils that reach off and connect with neurons and allow for communication outside of yourself in the not normal sense. This is communication outside of yourself into other things. This is very a valid form of neural communication, very valid. But there are other forms apparently now. And if we explore those, I want you to imagine now that it is 2100. Those chips are now very common, and I want you to imagine you're in a room, like an actual room. It's where we're going to be in, and you're going to fade in and out of this room as far as your consciousness is concerned. Your state of mind, your state of consciousness. You're going to fade in and out of this room very seamlessly from place to place to place. You're going to go from this room. Then you're going to go outside physically. This is still physical. Outside of this room over to the store to pick something up, or maybe get DoorDash. Maybe that's really all that's left. A robot will DoorDash you your fucking Chipotle 2.0. But basically you walk out, you go do something outside, and then you walk back to your house, and then you fade out of that room in your house to a completely different room. Essentially an extension of your house as far as you're concerned. And then from that other room inside of your house, as far as you're concerned, you're all going to fade into the office, which is virtual in this instance. And then from the office, you're going to completely fade out again into the bar, which is once again is completely, totally virtual. And you're going to fade out into another room in your house, which is actually virtual. And then you're going to fade back into your normal room, and you're going to go check the fridge for something, and then you're going to fade in. And it's over and over again. And then, so here's the reason why I bring this up. I want you to imagine, unlike right now, where the closest you can get is like VR chat and that sort of thing. Instead of VR chat, where we kind of have this idea if it's kind of cartoonish and it's basically a place to relax. And for the most part, it's not a place to generate money or income or capital or anything. I instead want you to think of an environment where there is actually quite a lot of value, like quite literal value in all of these things. Like you actually are in the office virtually, and it's a very important, very serious affair. And then maybe after that, you have a meeting with the bank, and it's perfectly virtual, and you have a very serious discussion. And maybe you go to the doctor virtually. Like I mean to like actually put like not to the doctor like you're getting checkup, but like you're speaking to a doctor about something. I don't know. Maybe you are, if it gets weird enough. But I mean to bring this to your attention to completely reframe the reference point when we normally conceive of virtual reality, because it seems quite silly on the cusp of it when you first look at it. You're like, well, how is that possibly equally meaningful as real reality? But if you stuff the virtual reality full of meaning, like things that we are inherently finding meaningful today, stuffing till it's full. Once you do that, the stepping stone, the bridge you cross from physical reality to virtual reality becomes quite dull or quite dim, and it you fade in and out of it quite quickly as soon as meaning goes first. As soon as meaning goes out there, suddenly everything out there is very quite serious and quite. As soon as things that are important to you are out there, things become quite meaningful immediately. And the frame of reference that we approach virtual reality that we have now, where a lot of people think it's quite silly, could very well be something that is systemic to 2024 and maybe not be the common parlance in 2080. It's hard to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's sort of a point that definitely needs to be touched on, is that, and this is something that we discussed in the last topic as well, is that obviously there is not an equivalency in experience between virtual worlds right now and our reality as we live it. But as is the case with any technology that we have created, these things increase exponentially. And if it does turn out that virtual reality, or whatever extension of that it becomes, turns out to be just like cell phones or television or the internet, home computers or anything like that, perhaps one day it will be as widespread, 2100 with everybody having a Neuralink or something like that. We can only speak, in speculation right now. And you also touched on something else that I at least want to mention before the episode is through, and that's the importance of a space like this. But when I say a space like this, I mean the actual, the culmination of the virtual environment. So like VR chat as a platform for this particular example, or whatever metaverse insert here that you want to describe, the network that connects all of these people together, the importance of that being owned not by a corporation that is interested in profit, but by the people who actually make it a meaningful place to have an experience, which, in my humble, very socialist opinion, is a very intriguing reflection upon how one might wish the actual world to be. But that is an entirely separate political conversation.
I'm not gonna lie, that's very wishful thinking. I don't think that's how it's going to go in any case.
Oh no, that's why Ernest Cline wrote Ready Player One.
No.
But
No.
All of that aside,
like looking at Ready Player One, right? We don't have to suggest that this is too much of a leap. And I'm not talking about the contents of the book. I'm talking about the impoverished, thousands or whatever, millions. And entertainment has become so available, cheap. You don't have to go anywhere and do anything. I mean, I imagine that in a world like Ready Player One, only the super rich would actually go see the Grand Canyon. You know what I mean? Only the super rich would go and gain an authentic experience, and it would become this higher class of living not to do VR, not to do virtual reality.
Oh yeah.
And in other words, by raising the floor on technology, it's doing it because we're so greedy. It would actually do the opposite of what technology is supposed to do, and lower human life. That's what Ready Player One's trying to talk about.
Oh yes.
You know what I mean?
High tech, low life.
Yeah. I'm kind of reminded of like fabricated or energized food in Star Trek, and how there's this phenomenon in there where there's still people out there, even though you can energize food, that would prefer to have real wine made at a real winery, and all that sort of thing. And it's a class above. It's a class above, and it's this other thing, this subset that's better. And now in Star Trek, of course, they have this perfect utopia, so it's not like what we're referencing right now, but it's similar. You have like this ground floor created of first food, first water, then food, and entertainment. Now, resources and then entertainment. And what we're seeing now is the perfect loosening of entertainment across the masses. And it's really quite, it's going to have a pretty profound effect. And I think that's what you're saying out before you. It's been happening for a while. It's been happening for a very long time. But like the amount, like you used the word interactive earlier, like how it's now interactive entertainment and all that. And like be interactive in all sorts of ways. And I think that's probably the new dimension to it that we didn't have previously, like when it comes to virtual things. Because in a sense, television in the 80s, that's virtual and that's something. But it wasn't interactive like it is now. That's a different phenomenon.
That's what I think is so crucial about this today.
I would actually like to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it actually has to do with timescale, right? I think that when Bray talks about interactive, they obviously mean immediate interaction. Okay, so So the Star Trek holodeck, for example, that's immediate interaction. Okay. So we go one step, previous to that, and we have what? Films? Is that agreeable?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Or television. Let's do actually television, because films were before television. Okay. So you have this broadcast signal, and they can gather data on how well that broadcast is doing in the case of like months, for example, especially before the internet. It was just that they had to gauge, popular demand and so on. In other words, the shows that were doing it for me, those lived, and the ones that didn't live.
Mm-hmm.
And so previous to that, we had films, and companies that were putting out good films lived, and companies that didn't put out good films bought companies that did make good films. So I mean, then now we have Disney and Warner Bros. So anyway, you get my point, right? That they didn't, they don't have audience, feedback, and there's no interaction there. Okay, and then you go back another step, and you have books, and
Right.
you don't have audience feedback on those for a long time. Okay, so but there's always been an element of interaction. It's just how patient you're willing to be. And so actually, if you go back far enough, whenever we're constructing things like the original stories that we still have, like, I mean, myth, those
Yeah, you
had to
can
be
go
interactive.
all the
I
way
mean,
back to ancient humans.
I mean, those had to be intensely interactive. Uh, for example, they were interactive with the environment. They were interactive with each other. It was a collective storytelling. One person didn't make probably hardly any one of the myths about.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to be intensely interactive. And D&D, tabletop games are actually a really good example of that. You get together and you tell a story together. That's the point. And so those are intensely interactive. But we're finally now to the point where the technology and the speed have caught up to that level of interaction.
Right.
Where you can have immediate feedback from the digital environment.
Oh yes, and that has allowed us to create exactly the topic of tonight's discussion, which are these virtual worlds, these virtual realities, and that's I think why I'm so drawn to those as a concept, because I'm quite literally in the career path of storytelling. That is my whole gig. It's my whole philosophy. I think everything ultimately revolves around it for human beings. And so when I see the capability or the potential for something like a virtual reality, I see quite literally the technological omni tool for telling whatever sort of story that you want. Like one of the hottest things right now is the fact that people can do something like D&D online or use digital resources to assist that. Not quite the same category, but like Baldur's Gate 3, the game, was an immense success because it is quite literally D&D as a video game.
But it still has those limitations.
It does still have those limitations.
In other words, you cannot speak into existence a thing that you would like to manipulate the story by.
Right.
In Baldur's Gate, you have. I'm certain you have thousands of paths you can take in Baldur's Gate. I'm certain there are many endings to the game you can achieve and so on. But there are still a discrete number of endings.
Right. And this is another thing too. And like I said, I'm intentionally trying to rope in video games to this discussion because of that interactability, like we've just discussed. And so it really wasn't even that long ago that I was reading different articles about people speculating about, oh my gosh, one of the greatest games of our time, Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls. What's going to happen when people get artificial intelligence on board. You'll be able to do anything. Like worlds can just be generated before your very eyes. You'll never, Todd Howard will never have to do any more work in his life. They'll have sold Skyrim once on a subscription package with AI, and the game just keeps going forever. That's quite literally what we're talking about or at least what I'm trying to speak on with this discussion of virtual realities. Right now, we are still limited. We know this, but the technology continues to improve, and one day we may be able to do almost like Trevor was saying at the beginning of the episode, and just stream of consciousness or allow some narrative that we desire to be crafted along, and we can do whatever. And so what I'm trying to find and sort of just talk about is the quality of experience that you can have in an environment like that, and how, I wouldn't say if at all, obviously it has some sort of relationship or impact, how those relay to our experience in the natural world, or if we had a life like described, where perhaps most people are living a lot of their lives in this virtual sense, and much less of it in the natural sense.
So Bray, like in Star Trek, we would be wheeling you to the therapist office for hollow sickness. Like that's what they call it.
That's what they call it.
Hollow addiction. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so
yeah.
like in Star Trek, there's like one main character that suffers through it, and we actually see him suffer through it over the course of two different franchises in the IP. And then of course there's the second Matrix movie where he's talking with like the lead counselor. The main character's talking with the lead counselor, and he goes, "Okay, so Neo, these machines, we've got power over them, right?" And Neo's like, "Well, yeah, we can turn them off." And then he goes, "Yeah, and then we die. So who's got the power?" You know what I mean? So look, my question, and kind of like the question that is begged, right, is if these virtual experiences are as authentic as natural ones, right? If we just kind of go under that assumption for a moment, what is to become of us when we have to consider the very real, natural consequences of the natural world?
Mm-hmm.
For example, what if the power goes out? What then? Well, what if a data packet isn't sent right and your system crashes? I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. In other words,
oh, absolutely.
We have to realize that these digital worlds are in fact a subset of the very real material world that we occupy.
Sure, yeah. We talked about this the last time we like during like the second part, or this being the third. We talked about contingency. Virtual reality is contingent upon physical reality, and it is a subset therein. And there are things that can be done that render it inert and off. And the more energy, the more meaning you dump into these things. Like if you find someone who's chronically online, like in a sense of the word that we don't understand right now, like what I'm trying to say is we have the word chronically online today, but it doesn't equate to what chronically online means in 2040. It's a different term.
Oh no,
I don't think it equates to what it means in 2030.
Exactly,
or for that matter, right. 2027.
I want you to imagine that you have married someone that is perfectly virtual. I want you to imagine that. I want you to imagine it is Elder Scrolls 7, and you have found.
Trevor, we haven't even got the sixth one yet.
Yeah,
well, that's not hear me out. Yeah. Well, hear me out. All right, so Elder Scrolls
that won't come out till 2050.
Right.
When it does,
the next life.
Well, I'm telling you to stay away from it for this reason. I'm telling you this is a warning. This is like a siren's beckoning call in like the Odysseus. Like you really shouldn't listen. You really shouldn't.
But I bought my amulet of Mara and everything.
I'm telling you, really. All right. So hear me out. Here's the scenario. I'd want you to imagine you have invested so much meaning, so much time into a contingent reality that if it does shut off, it would equate essentially to the same state of being when
Of
you
grief.
find out that your wife and your 2 children have died in a car crash on their way home
Grief.
this evening. That degree of grief will hit you in the same sense. Like
Also,
it reminds me of a. Please.
I'd like to comment on the fact that eventually we will use the stones to destroy the stones. You know, like we will develop technology so far that eventually all these like Renaissance nuts, for example, will just live in a Renaissance world.
That's right. That's a great way to.
They will use technology to go back. You know what I mean? I mean, like me and my good friend Brad would probably use a great deal of our time to go live in medieval England. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Or reenacting major historical battles over and over again, like they did in Deep Space Nine.
What was it? The Battle of Clock-to-Kel-Brock or something?
Or better yet, they would like reenact like World War II like airplane battles. Fly around in airplanes and shoot down the Germans.
It'd just be a group,
just reenacting the same battles. Yeah,
it's a group of guys back in the Roman times, just going, "Man, we missed out." You know, like.
And I can't stand that mentality.
It is, yeah.
It's putrid.
So what am I? Let me go back to this whole wife thing. Just imagine this. Imagine this.
Okay,
where some dude on the other side of the planet thinks it would be really funny to corrupt your save game file, and then just like that, your wife and your children
just
are
fuck
dead.
you. I mean, truly,
your
fuck
wife
you into the dirt.
And your children are dead. Like I want you to picture this.
Like he killed your wife and children, and now you have to go on a digital quest to do the same to him.
You're right. I mean, at that point, like there could actually be physical murder involved. I mean, this is the death of loved ones, in a sense.
Travel with me for a second back to I could never specify the year. It's not worth the Google search, but travel with me back in time instead of to the future, to where human beings were putting together societies and creating these sort of socio-cultural norms, and come with me to the very first marriage ever, you know. What's the word?
Documented.
Sure.
Conceptualized. I don't know.
And as you, Trevor, are about to walk into the metaphorical chapel and tie the knot, I run up to you and I say, "Trevor, don't do it. You're about to get married to someone, and you're going to throw so much meaning into this relationship." And then one day somebody could just come by and whack your wife and children.
You'd be much better off staying at home.
Insurmountable.
I see what you're trying to do, but I'm going to negate it using my magical my counterattack here. I'm going to say that unlike that physical wife that you could potentially marry, this person is in a contingent reality, contingent upon this one, meaning it's automatically in a more shaky, considerably more shaky ground. It's essentially like building a house of cards where you've built it on a whole other level. If anything happens to it,
Trevor,
it's considerably more.
Hold on, time out. For real, you know that I'm not trying to make this point stick, okay? But I have to bring it up.
Please,
okay?
Go ahead.
The idea of being in a marriage, in a human, artificial world of being married, is contingent on, say, biology, a totally different realm, a totally different world. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that we already live in a completely fake environment. You are in a synthetic cave right now. You know, that's where you are. Your home, your dwelling is a synthetic cave. Think about think about the synthetic grass you have on your carpet right now. That's synthetic grass.
Well, I'm not talking. Listen, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about.
It's what you're talking about.
No, it is not. No, it is not. No, it is not.
No. Bray is sat here saying, "Okay, we've got this concept of marriage finally down pat, right?
Right.
Whereas 2 days ago, you could just kind of just be with whoever you wanted to because we're apes."
Well, what I'm saying has nothing to do with that, though. I mean, I totally agree that it's a synthetic. It's an abstraction. It's something that was made up at some point by apes.
And the video game is an abstraction.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. All of it is. Listen, that is not something I would disagree with. And
no, it's not.
Solid point. But that's not what I'm talking about. When I say that it is a contingent reality, what I mean to say is all of that is true, and also it is on considerably more shaky grounds. Bad things can happen at a considerably higher margin than if you were just in base reality. It's more dangerous.
I see. That's where I would disagree, because I think it could be argued that it's just as likely for somebody to whack your physical living wife as it is for the servers to go down in a catastrophic way.
People have been shitheads for all eternity. You know what I mean? Like,
okay, you know what? I renege. I got to think about it a little bit more out loud.
It's worth the
thing.
Let
me think it out loud a little bit. I mean, well, for one, this virtual wife is in fact quite immortal, at least compared to human terms.
Well, okay. So real quick, time out.
Okay, go on.
Let's go back to the concept of marriage. Okay.
Well, yes, perfectly synthetic. There's no. Yeah, go ahead.
Look,
go ahead.
So none of us believe in a deity, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no cosmic marriage, but like you just kind of enter this social contract with this other person. You feel me? And we all agree that that's what that means.
What's his name when we need him?
Who?
A Total Fabrication.
Oh yeah, Jonathan Frakes. Yeah. We made it up. We made it up. And to be honest with you, you know, the institution of like Judeo-Christian marriage is pretty anti-woman, you know, so we did make it up. I mean, we made it up. And so what I'm trying to say is that Bray, you know, I'm trying to steelman Bray's argument here. If we consider the digital wife, okay, or the digital boy wife, if you're so inclined. I mean, you know, we made it up.
We did.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I mean to say about this is that most of the stuff...
Will digital sheep have to provide consent? I mean, you know...
Can I? Oh, Jesus Christ. All right.
I'm just saying, like, you know, do androids count digital sheep? I mean, will digital wives have to provide consent, I wonder?
Is that what the point? Is that where you were going with that point?
Go ahead, Trevor, go ahead.
I thought you were going a different direction with that point.
I'm just... Y'all know me. I'm going to say every quiet part out loud.
All right.
Here we are.
All right. Fair. I will say, I do want to raise one issue with this virtual wife affair thing you're thinking about.
Virtual partner, whatever.
Personal partner.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a better way to say it. Your personal partner scenario. I do want to raise some qualms with it that go beyond what I've already said. So here's another one. Okay. So we talked about experience earlier. So this really touches on meaning here. This is meaning connecting to this whole point you made about relationships from that book that you read. How one of the ways that we can conduit meaning is that it has to do with making relationships with others. So I want to open up a framework for you, and I want to see how you encounter the framework, because I'm not gonna tell you any of these things are inherently important to you or to anyone. Like inherently important to reality, because I can't make that claim. I'm not God. There is no primal rationality to judge our rationality. I can't tell you how to build a context. I can only give you this scenario and see how you feel about it. I want you to imagine that there is something it is like there is an actual experience to being Trevor, and there is an experience to being Stefan, and there's an experience to being Bray, as well as Bray's mother, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
However, and just let me build this framework. Don't fight the framework. Just exist within it and tell me how you feel about it. Inside this framework, there is also virtual reality in Skyrim, let's say, and there are virtual people in that reality. There is nothing it is like. They're like, in the philosophical sense, zombies. There is nothing it is like to be who's like the one that everyone always marries in Skyrim. What's her name? That doesn't matter.
Camilla Valerius.
Yeah. That's fair. All right, Camilla Valerius. But there's nothing it is like to be within this framework. Just to finish this point, there's nothing it is like to be whatever that name was. There's nothing it is like to be that person. There's nothing it is like to be anyone inside of the Elder Scrolls 7. This entire landscape world.
We actually have two words for that. So these constructs are animated, but they're not alive.
Fair. All right, you can say that they're animated. Mm-hmm. That's a great way to say it. Now, here is my qualm with that. Let me just fill up this grand scape of the sequence here, and then I want you to exist within it and tell me how you feel about it. Specifically Bray, because he's the proponent here. of this context, and I want to try to shake him loose from it with this point. All right, I want you to imagine that you are within Elder Scrolls 7, this grand scape of a world that constantly develops. There's no end; it just keeps going. There's no main quest line, or at the very least, it splinters into billions of different quest lines. It doesn't actually physically end. There are
Cyborg
people who
Todd
live.
Howard has made it into perpetuity.
Mhm.
Yeah, whatever that means. It's just
Right.
it's big, it's huge, it's giant, it's history, it's worldly. However, at the exact same time, within this endless world, there is nothing it is like to be anything in it. There is no suchness. There is no actual any like something or rather behind the eyes of these virtual people you encounter all day, every day for however long you decide to play this game for.
I want Bray
Now,
to respond to this for sure.
yes. So now that you exist in this world, let's say you're chronically alive in the 2030 sense of the word, where you spend most of your time talking, communicating, marrying, having relations with, producing
Premarital
children
sex
with.
in the digital world.
Terrible. How dare. Like, imagine all of these things. And yet, at the end of the day, when the lights go out, it was always just you alone in a room. Always. I mean, how do you encounter that? And that is, I think, the primary qualm against this whole point about meaningful virtual reality.
So for real, I want Bray to collect their thoughts about this, okay? But I have something to say about this. Okay, in Elder Scrolls, it's so funny we're talking about Elder Scrolls. In Elder Scrolls, this happens, okay? Like this character named Tiber Septim realizes that he is not real, and that's how he creates a new world. That's how he completely alters the landscape and trajectory of his own world by realizing it's not real. I mean, you know, Michael Kirkbride, I believe was his name, wrote all this in like the Elder Scrolls 3 or whatever. And it's always been intensely fascinating to me. Like, he realizes that he exists in a fantasy that we have created. But not us. It's called the Dreamer. In other words, like the digital, you know, realm or whatever. It's fascinating.
It's very coincidental that we would. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's a perfect example because it's such a powerful world. And go ahead, please.
Sure. So one thing that I do still need to collect thoughts on is your ending point about at the end of the day you are still just in a room, and my most initial thought or my most initial
Shadows in the cave.
Reaction to that is, you know, that's exactly how I experience virtual reality today. Is that I, you know, just the other night, I right here in front of this very camera and computer, I stood on the other side of this PC and had on my headset, my controllers, my full body tracking, and I sat in this room and mimicked, or I didn't even mimic, I did the actions that I would do when I am out with my friends at a nightclub, because that's exactly what I did in virtual reality, is go to several different virtual nightclubs with a friend of mine, dance. I drank in real life. The motions were instead mimicked in the virtual world for that. But I did all of these things, and at the end of the day, after I said, you know, good night, and took the headset off, I'm standing here in this room. But to me, it made none of that experience that I had in the virtual world any less meaningful than had I done it in the real world, because for a roundabout way, I still return to the very same room at the end of the day and go to bed.
I wish to press against you a little bit here. I think
sure, and just to
I was doing something very specific when I made that framework. If you still have a point, go ahead. But
no, I'm just saying it was not remotely my intention to own in on that point. I'm far more interested in your point about the animated versus alive thing, or at least that's how Stefan put it. But
in other words,
go
your
ahead.
friends don't count because they're in the digital landscape with you.
Right.
Yeah, see, that's not quite the framework. I mean, completely juxtapose these two things. The life you're living right now and the life
you would create.
And the life that you would create in the circular world elsewhere. Like, I want you to imagine a life lived with people in it, and a life lived with animated things that look like people. That's essentially the framework. And that's where this is. Or not.
So, if you just prefer them not to look like people, they don't have to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this could be completely, totally abstract. It really could be, yes.
That's what I meant by bringing up the Talos thing, the Tiber Septim thing. He literally could change the nature of his reality, and so could you. It's a digital landscape.
Mm-hmm. So what I would say to that is, and I hope this makes sense, and it may be easily assailable or assaultable or however assailable. It may be very easily knocked down, but this was my initial thoughts when you said that. Comparing a human being, something that we know that there is something to be like because I am and we are all are. Therefore, we extend that idea onto our peers.
I can't know that, but I mean, I get
sure. I'm granting that sort of for the sake of conversation, but absolutely. My direct experience with, let's just put it blatantly, an NPC appears no differently than my interactions with a real person. If we're at least granting the capabilities one day that they will act just, not have some robotic speech pattern and walk around like a dingus, technological limitations put aside.
Yeah, those are all just engineering problems.
That's exactly what
what I experience through my senses, which is all I can really ever hope to do besides cognizing, is practically identical from an NPC interaction to a real human being interaction. The fact that we consider one of those alive and one of them simply animated changes nothing about my direct experience with them.
I would have to press you on that in the following way.
Go ahead.
First off, when you mentioned the whole soft problems, or Stefan mentioned it, and I think we could say soft problems of virtual reality, that is things you could fix, like making it more advanced.
Mm-hmm.
In this framework, I want you to imagine it's like as perfect as can be. Like it is interchangeable with base reality. It is really
Trevor,
good.
Like you said earlier, if it was the Neuralink type of idea, it would very much be the case that you could just synthesize whatever input you like into the brain, including pain.
Yes.
Yes.
It is really, truly quite interchangeable with base reality. That is taken care of. Now, here's where I want to press you on this. Specifically, there is in fact a difference in that knowledge in this framework that there is something it is like to be a Trevor and a Stefan in this area, but it is a blank room in the other one. You're having a conversation with a being that has no nous, has no something it is like to be that being, no experience, no qualia, no consciousness. It's just you're watching a series of feedback loops. Now, what you could do right now as a launch against my point, it would be a good point to make right now, is you could say, well, Trevor, you can't possibly know whether or not they aren't conscious. There isn't a consciousness once you reach a certain point, even in virtual reality. You could try to make that point.
Well, I was actually going to make a point like that one. So I'm still kind of like hinging on the idea I was trying to talk about earlier, how our very synthetic human world at this point is contingent on a much more real world below us, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
In like talking about natural laws and biology and things like that. Is it possible that we will develop or maybe even have developed machines that are as conscious as, say, a dog or a cow? I mean, people have meaningful interactions with cows all the time,
Right.
Sometimes too meaningful, yeah.
And not to detract from your question, but that is where I would have gone with Trevor's line of thought, or as a response, is we have meaningful interactions with, or at least I can say that I do, and I would venture to say there are many, many people who would agree with me in that I have interactions with not living things like a cow or a cat. I do have those things, but what the point I'm making is toward things that are animated and not alive, things that there is no such thing it is like to be them. I bought, matter of fact, 2 pieces of art at Comic-Con here. One of this character Karlach and one of this character Shadowheart from the game Baldur's Gate 3. because I so valued the interactions that I had with them in this video game. I so valued the interactions I had in Cyberpunk 2077 that I immediately got a tattoo from the video game the day after I finished the game. They meant so much to me that I sought to pursue some sort of memorabilia for an experience that I had, which is more to say than I've done for some human beings that I've met and interacted with.
I don't think you have a Stefan picture in your
I don't.
poster hanging in your house.
I should. Perhaps I should.
I have a couple of Bray on my wall.
And to be honest, though, I probably do have photo. Matter of fact, I do have stuff of you two, but you know, I have obviously interacted with you
what I'm
far
trying to
more.
say is you don't have a poster
just dedicated.
Like with a crop top and things like
these are these are tokens that I have of appreciation for interactions that I had, just like I might have, like we just said, photos or other things that are tokens of appreciation that I have.
I'm actually following Bray on this for once. And by the way, I want to hurt my own point earlier. It's just like I said in episode whatever 6 months ago. My cat is still far more complex than any computer that I'm aware of right now, and all of those little bitty complexities really do matter. But anyway, I'm following Bray on this one for once, perhaps, because like I don't know.
Think about if you've ever had an experience like that.
Well, look. Let's go one level deeper. And even just say book characters.
Sure.
I've had no interactions with those except to read about them. And I can recount at least a couple characters that I'm, deeply, madly in love with. You know what I mean? And this might be a bit of a surprise, but one of my favorite characters that justifiably got so much love in the movie as opposed to the book was Boromir from Lord of the Rings. Just as an example, just putting it out there. Or Data for Trevor. I mean, I know he knows that one.
Well, I know both of those. Come on.
Oh yeah, of course. I figured you would, but just making sure we had one in there for you. You know, I mean, like, I don't know. It's all just right. Like, as well. I told you guys not too long ago that we just finished a 3-year campaign of mine, of a story of my own creation. And my favorite character in that setting that I generated for them and made a story about. And so, in other words, I let them into my storytelling. One of the favorite characters I have is named Wizartham. I love him to death in pieces. I don't know what I would do without him. I genuinely don't know what I would do without Wizartham.
Just as a side note, I think that is one of the most intimate things that you can do in a sexual manner is invite somebody into your
storytelling,
your conception
Absolutely.
of But this character, is that what you mean to say? Is just that you had this character that you created
that's
so dear.
That's what
I
mean to say is, I mean, I know I authored him. I do not know what I would do without the character that I'm talking about.
Right.
I don't know what my life would look like without him.
I wonder, how could imagine. I'll take the reins from Trevor here and instead invite you to my imaginary situation. And say, imagine a way that you could step inside of a virtual space and interact with that character face to face in a way that...
See, that's what's so dangerous about all this, is that I would give so much to make that happen.
I kind of have a concern. I want to bring it back to Star Trek like a 9th time.
For the nth time. For the nth time.
That's probably the best way to say it.
It's so good.
Yes, and I think I want to open up an issue brought in by Star Trek in one of the less watched series, but still good in my opinion, Voyager. One of the episodes, there's a pretty spooky one where the captain, Captain Janeway, she, her like husband, they got divorced while they were lost at sea, essentially lost in space,
Mm-hmm.
and she couldn't date anyone on the ship.
I
The
know the
ship's
very
lost.
episode you're talking about. That's how bad
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. No, but it gets quite serious. I think the implications are quite sincere, quite serious.
They are.
So she can't date anyone. They're trying to get back to Earth, and it's like hundreds of years away. And they're trying to get back and take whatever shortcuts they can to get back to Earth. And she's the captain. She's not comfortable with dating or seeing or being romantic with any of her other with any of her subordinates.
At least she's making a professional decision.
Yes, but the problem becomes they have a virtual reality, they have a holodeck, and basically as a way to relax, they create a Irish bar, like an Irish little village that they all go to in the evenings, and it's a place to relax. And like, there's a guy in there. I think he's the bartender. Yes,
he's the barkeep, and I think his name is Michael.
His name is Michael, and he has like this very like kind of like Irish handsome, you know. He's Irish handsome. He has like an Irish handsomeness about him. I've said the same thing 3 times, but that's what it is. And basically,
he's rugged, Trevor. Come on.
Yeah, rugged. He's like
use
ready.
Use your skills there. I'm saying, what does that even mean? It's
rugged. He's got like
rough trade, Trevor.
Yeah, he's got very scratchy beard looking thing. He has like cuts on his face here and there. He has like scratchy black hair. Rugged is a damn good word to use. I should have
Irish handsome.
It's late out here. It's late out here, dude.
I agree.
Yeah, I feel it. We'll wrap up after this point, but in that scene, or in this episode, Captain Janeway met this man and became infatuated by his handsome character, and then spoke to him after like a conversation with someone else, and like they had to come onto him and asked him a couple questions, and then at the end of it, she finds out that he has a wife. So the following night, she goes into the holodeck and loads up his character. So she's just looking at him in the same sense you look at like a Skyrim character as you like make little edits to them before you play the game, and went change this, change that.
She makes him taller.
Change that. Yep.
She makes him more educated.
Yep.
And then deletes the wife.
Yeah, that's basically what she does. And after that, she keeps on making more changes. She goes out on a date with him the next day. The date goes great, but there are just little things that she doesn't like. She changes those. And again and again and again. And like eventually she realizes, my God, like what am I even doing at this point? This is a completely fabricated person. Because like every little thing that I like or don't like about like a potential lover, I just make the change instantly. Like she even mentions at one point, like he like snored in his sleep, and then while he wasn't looking, she opened up a little interface and got rid of it, then shut it back off, and then he doesn't snore in his sleep anymore. And I think that that's a very serious concern in this frame of reference you're gripping on here with virtual reality and virtual characters and virtual actors in this way, both in terms of lovers, but also anything else. I think that is a very serious distinction we need to make here, and I think it's really quite dangerous.
But now look, Trevor, look real quick. You're forgetting a part of that episode, I bet. Maybe not forgetting, but you haven't mentioned it.
Sure.
In the course of that episode, the holographic doctor tells Janeway, "This is logical. Why wouldn't you do this? You can't date anyone under your command. You should be doing this." The holographic, and then she goes, "Michael is a light bulb." And then the holographic doctor says, "Is that how you feel about me?" And then she keeps walking down the hallway with a sour face, like, no, it's not how I feel about you. You know what I mean? And it's like, what's the deal here?
Well, I think that kind of reveals something, though. She's balancing 2 different emotions at the same time is what she's doing. She's balancing the serious emotions and meaning that she feels to the doctor, but at the same time, she's also balancing the devoid feeling that she feels about Michael at the exact same time. And she's not... Her gut is telling her to lean towards the doctor being quite meaningful, and therefore the Michael is meaningful, and that's the summary of the episode. But I think that more reveals that what's actually happening with the doctor may actually be a little bit more devoid of meaning than we're comfortable with saying out loud. I think,
see, Trevor, that's exactly what they're trying not to get you to think. I mean, they're trying to get you to think that the doctor's struggles are not in vain, Trevor.
Fair. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. That's right.
Oh man.
All right. This
I mean,
might be a weird way.
Trevor watched that episode and said,
Oh.
what would Nietzsche think?
And you know, to that point, for example, small anecdote, I went an entire playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077, got my reference in for the second time this episode. Basically, long story short, the way that I made my character at the very beginning before I even started affected my capability to romance one of the characters. And I played the entire portion of the game that, you know, affected the ability to have a relationship with this character under the assumption that I would be able to do so. And after I got the notification that I had completed everything relevant to this character, I went, well, hold on. Well, how could I have possibly missed the steamy sex scene that I so well deserved after treating this character so well, you know? And then I come to find out after
transactional affections.
After a quick Google search, it turned out that my whatever settings I had selected at the beginning made that character more or less not attracted to me. They were not compatible, you know, sexual orientation wise, and I was shattered because I had grown so fond of this character, and I was like, oh my gosh, I had this whole narrative out of my head that this was going to be my romance option, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, people modded the game, so regardless of what body type or voice that your character has, they will romance you regardless. They have quite literally done exactly what you all have said. Now, to me, I don't know if I would. First of all, I don't know if I would play the game again because of a whole discussion about authenticity, but that's another thing. But would I have downloaded a mod had I known it existed and had I known the circumstances in order to get that pleasure anyway? Me personally, I don't know that I would. But
isn't this
perhaps,
just? Please go ahead.
Would I have reloaded a save if a character that I really appreciated died in the process? I've done that plenty of times. As a matter of fact, Baldur's Gate, I've reloaded countless times when one of my companions got clapped. Yeah. Would it have been more noble of me to press on and just remember their absence? Like, this is the whole... I need a video game ethics.
All right. So, all I would say is like the only... Go ahead.
I would just like to say that, you know, by the time 3 years had elapsed, I had killed almost everyone that mattered, you know, including Wazartham, the character that I'm that fond of, including him, most especially him, I killed, and when I say this, I need you to know that I mean it. I hate myself for doing it. You know, I mean, it's bad.
But it's still meaningful either way.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the character lived or died, whether the character was, you know, pansexual or straight, or whether the character snored in their sleep or not. It was all meaningful at the end of the day to some narrative that a human being was crafting. So unless either of you have any other closing remarks?
Bray, I think we can just close it right there.
Bray is literally declaring victory right now.
No, I know you're being facetious, but I don't mean to indicate. It's such an... Obviously, because this is a Bray episode in nature, we have gone all over the place and somehow ended upon an absolutely excellent Star Trek reference. I will say, and again, is only you know, yet another example of me being an absolute fool for not having consumed this show as much as my fellow co-hosts, because it seems almost perfectly crafted for me.
I want Bray to finish us off for sure. But, like, you know, I started this episode thinking one way, like just one way. I haven't had a good day. You know what I mean? I was not in the mood for this whimsy. You know what I mean? And here we are. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that my positions have like totally changed or anything, but like I don't know, playing devil's advocate against Trevor like real hard tonight made me see a few things in another way. You know what I mean? And curse Bray, like damn him. You know what I mean for making me think about the meaning that I've tied to characters who I've authored. You know what I mean?
Very good.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. I hope you will consider, if you are an avid player of video games or tabletop or any sort of interactive medium, if you just spend a lot of time in virtual reality, consider the implications of what we've discussed here tonight and ask yourself, how meaningful are those relationships that you forged, whether it's with an NPC or an inanimate object? Who knows? Will we visit this topic again? I have no idea. Now we've got a whole nother avenue of thinking to do. But thank you all for joining us, and we will see you in the next one.
Peace.